that the teachers union and the woke left are interested in the school and the institution, whereas those who are advocates for parental choice and school choice are advocates for the child. What is the best thing for the child? So you have to drive that message forward that we are focused on what is best for the child. And you have to elect people to school boards who believe in the child and the primacy of the child.
Hey, Joyful Warriors, Tiffany Justice here with the Joyful Warrior podcast with Moms for Liberty. I have two amazing guests with me today, Rabbi Yaakov Menken and Sheva Tauby, a mom of 8 from New York. And today we're going to talk about the fundamental right of parents to direct the education of their child and their medical care and their morality and their religion. It's a right, it's a responsibility, and it's a responsibility that Sheva takes very seriously, as do many other parents in New York. Rabbi Menken spoke at a recent event that we had in Philadelphia about the fact that the Yeshivas in New York have been under attack by the New York City DOE. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about that today from Sheva. And Sheva, I'm just going to kind of pass this to you now. We'd love to learn more about your family and about some of the challenges and concerns that you have about education in New York City right now.
Sure. Hi. So happy to be here. Happy to be a part of a wonderful cause, which is so important today. Before I got married and before I had my children, I was pretty set on sending my children to a Jewish religious school, but that focused on Judaic studies for half of the day and secular studies for the other half of the day, which is where I attended school growing up, high school, elementary school. I never thought I would be a parent that would choose to have Judaic studies solely or focusing mostly on Judaic studies. And when it came to looking for schools for my children, for my sons in particular, I did a lot of research and I saw that the top schools that kept coming up over and over again were the ones that focused mostly on Judaic studies. And it was then that I was like, wow, surprised. Like, let's see what's going on. Let's learn more about them and see why this is a top performing school. And it turns out that it still is to this day, of course, and just improving better and better. And the things that they come out with and the way the boys are graduating, it's just unparalleled to other schools, public schools, of course, and even other private schools that focus very much on secular studies as well. So I want to say that my son's school is about 2,000 children in the school to this day. Their day from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, depending on their age, focuses on primarily Judaic studies. There are parents that teach their children privately at home, either through another track. There's like a private school they go to. It's not really a school. It's like it's sort of like a school that they learn reading, writing, and math.
In English.
In English,
right.
Yeah.
They already are learning reading, writing, and the math that comes up in their Jewish education, but the point is additional. Right. Go ahead.
Exactly. And if you want, there's also options of adding history, etc. But I would like to say that it's really interesting that majority of the boys from this particular school don't receive formal secular learning, which is so surprising. My sons learned how to read and write on their own, and it's not an exception. There's many boys there in the same boat. They had a few reading lessons, a few math lessons, but other things they learned through their own classes, through Talmud, through other things. It's not through formal learning math and reading and writing. And of course, they learn how to read and write in Hebrew. That's definitely. And my son's school also focuses on Yiddish as well, but it's just a separate thing. So what really brought me to, my husband and I, of course, were equally in this at all times, brought us the decision to bring our sons to this kind of school is because we saw the products of the school. We saw the kids. We saw the way they turned out. We saw their enthusiasm for life. We saw how balanced they were. We saw their health emotionally, mentally. And what more does a parent want from their children than to have them be happy, healthy, law-abiding citizens, contributing to society and being successful like that. So But it comes down to the definition of success. What does success mean, right? And it's also interesting to note that there's an overwhelmingly amount of business owners and professionals that are Orthodox religious people that did not receive a formal secular education, but it's astounding the ratio, that they didn't formally learn so many things, but at the same time they're very successful. Again, when I'm saying successful in quotes is because it's not only financially successful, they happen to be many of them financially successful, but today you can have a child that went to Princeton and top Ivy League colleges and are still sitting in their mother's basement playing video games at 42 years old. So is their child happy and healthy and contributing to society? No, but they received an education. Then you have yeshiva kids that are 24 and didn't receive, let's say, the top college education or didn't receive any college education at all, and they are raising healthy 2-family units, husband and wives, healthy children. So there's something more. There's got to be something more to it than just what you see on paper, the secular education, what's going on, what they're learning out of textbooks in school.
So you said you have your 3-year-old son. You'd like to send him to this school that you've identified you feel is the best school for him. You and your husband have identified as the best school for him. So my understanding is that New York City DOE has been under a lot of pressure for some time to produce a report regarding the yeshivas in New York. And I think I just saw the results of a report where they're saying that 26 of the 28 yeshivas are not actually giving students what the DOE feels they need in order to be successful or to reach mastery to be able to be, considered proficient students. So can we talk a little bit about what you're seeing happen, some of the politics behind it, because it seems like there's some politics happening. Perhaps Rabbi Menken, you could talk about that. And what has your experience been so far with this idea of this audit of, these private educational institutions and the government's opinion of them?
First of all, I don't know if I can stand up for Princetonians because unfortunately, as someone who graduated from the Princeton Computer Science Department, alongside Jeff Bezos, who apparently was rather successful with his education, I unfortunately can testify that I know of 1 or 2 people who did not actually do so well, despite coming out with a computer science degree at exactly the right time for an industry that was taking off. And so, unfortunately, Sheva is absolutely right about that, even though she made fun of Princeton. But
that's sorry.
Yeah, but also it is important to point out that this is, what Sheva is talking about. Her son's school is one of those schools that was clearly identified as completely insufficient. And the fact that they're not getting a formal English education means that the Tauby family is violating the law, according to the DOE. The school is insufficient. Now, we're talking about a public school system in New York City where 3/4 of 8th graders, as I said at your conference, are not proficient in math by their own standards. There's a lot of their own house that needs to be cleaned up. What has happened in this case is, as you described, there's a group called Young Advocates for Fairness in Education, YAFED, which is almost entirely comprised of members of the community who are malcontents and people who were never part of the community and have always had a chip against it. Is that, from even within the Jewish community on his left fringe, to have advocates against Orthodox Judaism is nothing new. This is a new tactic that they pulled off. Whenever the state asked for feedback, there were campaigns to make sure that parents knew about it and had the opportunity on the last round of when they were inviting feedback on the new rules. Again, you have a group of 20 advocates saying, the parents within the Orthodox community really need to say, they say that they need change. The state got 300,000 letters. 300,000 letters saying, please do not change the schools and do not interfere. We're talking about the Jewish community. We have a 3,000-year long experience with other governments trying to interfere with the education of our kids. The number of times that has actually improved matters is 0. There is a unaltered record of universal failure whenever outside forces tell parents, we're going to do your Jewish education better than you know how to do. As Sheva has made so clear, she's
Well,
making
and
the
so
choice. It's her kids.
why do you think that the yeshivas are such a threat? Why you have a group of Orthodox Jews in New York that would like to you'd like to educate your children in the manner with which you feel will yield the most successful and prosperous and happy life for them. And you have the government, the United States government, because we have compulsory education in the United States, right? Either you send your child to the government school or you have to give evidence to show that they're receiving an education through some other method. And what they're saying to you is that the education that you're choosing for your child doesn't count, that they aren't going to count it. Now, I looked into this issue a little bit, and they said, well, they don't have enough Yiddish people to be able to go in and do the evaluations, people that speak Yiddish. That was one excuse that they gave for why it was taking so long, I guess, to come to an analysis. Now the analysis has come out and said 26 of the 28 schools are not giving children what they need. So where do you go from here? What's going to happen going forward? Because I know there are a lot of other moms and dads who are watching what's happening in New York and saying, how long until the government says that the school that I'm sending my child to, that's a Christian school or what have you, an alternate learning style, before the government says, oh, sorry, nope, you don't count either. This school isn't going to, isn't going to meet muster for us, and we're going to shut you down and consider the education you're giving your child to not be relevant. It's scary.
I think what you're pointing out, which is a very real issue, is that the government has created an arbitrary checklist that they consider, oh, this is what a child needs to know. They're not looking at the successful outcomes. What Sheva is talking about is, you look at the business owners. What percentage of the graduates 10 years out are gainfully employed? What percentage of the graduates 10 years out are in a stable marriage and raising a family together, taking responsibility for their kids? What percentage of the graduates are incarcerated? There isn't a public school in New York City that measures anywhere close to the so-called failing yeshivas on any of these metrics. It's not even in the same solar system. So if you are actually being objective, if you actually cared about outcomes, this is not the direction you would go. Now, where we are...
If you actually cared about the fundamental rights of parents, the fact that the parent is a God-given right, the government does not give you that right, and they cannot take it away.
I was even taking as a given this idea that the Orthodox are backwards and uneducated and don't know what's good for their own kids. Even if you tried to go at it that way, by their own standards, they're doing so well. But what I also want to point out to you, which relates also to your last question, is there's a group in Britain called, the British have something called Ofsted, the Office of Standards in Education. And they are actually at the point where they are imposing on the parochial schools, you have to teach LGBTQ tolerance and alternate lifestyles in your schools. And they're saying that in England, and that's the problem that they are having with their schools, including their Hasidic schools, that would rather not teach any of these subjects at all. Of course, sexuality is not something you're going to ever find taught in a primary school under Orthodox Jewish auspices. Now, when you look at the real situation, what we do teach is that it doesn't matter how sinful the behavior, a person is a person, and you respect that person for who they are. We had a gay man, I don't think my kids knew this, but my wife and I certainly did, as our guest at our Sabbath table within the past few weeks. We treated him literally like any other guest. It just never came up. It was never discussed. I was at a recent family event where the hostess of the event gave me a ring and said that so-and-so and her gay partner are a little concerned about blah, blah, blah. And I said, don't worry, it's going to be fine. And we were there, and we were at the event, and afterwards the hostess said to me, it's obvious that you tried. And I said, we didn't try at all. It wasn't relevant. We're not in the business of going into an event which has nothing to do with anything, and the fact that they are more than just friends was not relevant to anybody's life. So why was I going to treat them any differently than any other human being? I'm going to treat them as human beings. If they want to argue with me about how I educate my kids, then I'm going to push back. But I'm not there to indoctrinate anybody else, and I'm not there to condemn somebody else for having a lifestyle that I don't approve of. Not my job to be their supervisor.
And I think a lot of American parents feel that way. I mean, I've said a couple times, Sheva, and you can talk a little bit about what the elementary or primary education looks like in some of the yeshivas in New York, if you could for a minute, because the least interesting thing about a child in elementary schools should be their sexual orientation. I've always said, I don't care if my kids are gay or straight. I'll love them. I want them to be kind, compassionate people who grow up to be kind and compassionate to others and have family and life and friends. That's important to me, right? That idea of success in life. Do they need to make the most money of anyone? No, I'd like them to be financially stable so that they can afford themselves a life where they can, not worry about putting food on the table for their family. But the idea that we're talking to kids about, are they gay or straight, and they're in like third grade, it's just ridiculous, right? And I think all moms are really coming together around that, but it seems like the schools, they don't seem to care about what you think or what I think.
Especially because I'm in this, in this arena of marriage and dating. There's absolutely no reason to bring anything up of sexuality until the proper time. If a child asks you, you respond. There's no secret. There's not hidden. It's not secretive. If they want to know something, right, you tell them. The same way, you're doing anything. It's a matter of fact. The way I taught my daughters about their bodies and getting their periods, this is what happens, this is what you do. Even I was excited. I'm like, I'm so excited. Now that means you'll be able to have a child. Isn't that amazing? They're like a little scared. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Now you can have.
It's amazing. Yeah. Right. Me too. I did this.
And that was it, like beginning and end of it. And even if my son, came home and asked me some questions about other things, sexuality that he heard somewhere or some this or that. And we don't really watch movies in my family or watch TV. So they're pretty, sheltered, if you want to say. But they do other stuff. We have a Wii, and we do, regular video games and stuff like that. We'll watch Disney occasionally.
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm saying, it's so much of these things. I think that parents also are afraid to be the sole educator of like topics of sexuality in their homes. So they sort of like push the responsibility over to the schools, which is irresponsible, if you ask me. I want to be the first to teach my child, not some teacher that I don't approve of and impose her ideas on my children. No way. I would be horrified if I heard anything like that.
I think it's very important to look at this situation as something where, this is an extension. They started with the public schools. They're going into the religious schools too. They're doing it because they can. They're doing it because they're not hearing from enough voices. It's obvious that the majority of Americans, and even the majority in a blue state like New York, do believe that parents are the ultimate arbiters of what is good for their kids. So how is it that all of a sudden, not only are the educators, these are the same educators who want to put LGBTQ in the classroom in the secular schools? They're going after the yeshivas. Part of this is clearly because the yeshivas are not woke. The yeshivas do not support LGBTQ. The kids are growing up learning a fundamentally different ideology. And these are people who, honestly, this is a violation of the Constitution. These are people who do not respect religious liberty. They don't respect, they have a godless religion called LGBTQ, and they want to put that in your classroom, indoctrinate your kids, embarrass and repress and bully Christian children and other children who support traditional values, be they Muslim, Jewish, or other. And then at the same time, they're going to go after the yeshivas and say, you know what? It's not only that you're lacking. Obviously, they're starting with so-called neutral things, but this goes immediately to, once the government's setting the standards, the government and not the parents are setting the standards.
I think that it's been a very important part of the conversation of school choice. And parents, there's a lot of fear with parents who homeschool or parents who have their children in different types of private schools, that if the money follows the child to those schools and it's taxpayer or federal money, that the values of the public school system, right? Because the values are being taught in public schools. Whose values are they? They're not the parents' values, right? We have government schools, they're government values, if there's such a thing, right? And we're not talking about civics and the founding documents of the United States of America, because as you pointed out, America was founded on the idea of religious liberty, but that is not something that we're seeing being exemplified in our public schools right now. So, I think, Sheva, to you, that your story is the fear of many other moms and dads who are now, taking their kids out of the public school and putting them into a private school, and they're concerned that a lot of the woke ideology it's going to follow. I mean, what's your message to them? What do you think will happen?
I mean, so Rabbi Menken already said there needs to be more voices. There needs to be more people not afraid to get up and say, realize what's going on. Like there's even certain things that I had no idea of. I'll credit Libs of TikTok, things that she puts up on her account. I'm like, unbelievable. Like am I so naive? But I'm like, no, I'm actually not that naive. I'm shocked. Right? And this is going on everywhere, and it's going to keep going. There needs to be more people that aren't afraid to speak up. That's for sure. And we know I think we know that we're the majority. I don't know what the numbers are. You can let me know. But at the end of the day, all moms and dads want, as I said in the beginning, is for their children to be happy, healthy, mentally healthy, contributing members to society. So that's all we care about at the end of the day. And,
yes.
Again, the government to trust that we're going to make that decision for our kids to reach this goal, this end goal. I just want to also mention before about I feel like mental health is a big priority in our schools. That's what I feel like. My daughter herself, she's in high school now. You know how there's a private all girls high school, which is great. And even she tells me sometimes, Mommy, all the peer pressure that goes on in my school, I can't imagine having boys added to the mix. She's like, you know what I mean? She's like, I'm always so thankful that I just I go to an all girls school. And she also does a camp every summer with a lot of secular people. And they're on their phones the whole time, like counselors, and text, this guy and that guy broke up, that my friend, so much drama. They have to deal. My heart goes out to these kids that have to deal with so much drama from such a young age. And it's not necessary. From our dating is that we don't touch ever until we're married. We don't touch. There's no physical touch. And it happens to be that when I was a dating coach for the secular community, and I'm talking about young professionals from top companies. These are people that are smart and talented and capable and doing financially really well. And I told them my old archaic advice, how to date. And I remember when they first met me, they're like, well, you're religious. And okay, so you've tried everything else. Now try this.
Right. Why not try this method? Because you've not had success yet. Yeah.
So I feel like there's a big emphasis on mental health in our yeshiva system. I was saying my daughter's school, they have a whole team of therapists that are available at all times for the girls to reach out to, which I think is amazing. And this is a newer thing. This is around the last 10, 15 years. They're so accessible and there's no shame around it, which is so cool. I look at my daughter, I'm like, so if you had something, you just walk over to one of these people. She's like, yeah, why not? I'm like, now I'm a little old fashioned. I'm like, okay, good, go for it, And it's usually, school related things and friends or some kids that unfortunately need deeper help. And great, they're there too for you, So.
But you don't have to worry. Like other moms do, like my friends, that one of the kids is going to go to the therapist and they're going to cut you out of an important conversation. I mean, if a child went to a therapist and said, I'm pregnant, or I'm, having thoughts of self-harm, or, what would happen in your daughter's school? How would the parent be engaged?
They would definitely get there's no question about it. They would get in touch with us for sure. Which, there's the conduit, just in the between person. But
you don't want a situation where there's no daylight, where there is daylight, between the teachers and the parents. Our fundamental approach to education is that the teacher is a representative of the parent. It is the parent's job to educate the child, nobody else. It says it right in the Bible, you shall teach it to your children. Your responsibility, you've got to do it. And if you send your kid to a school, that means that you trust somebody else's expertise, that they're going to do a better job than you could homeschooling that child. This is better for them. It's better for them, the social environment, for better than to be in classroom and everything else. And that's something that they seriously, people consider. And therefore they choose a school on that basis. But a school where teachers are being told, do not tell the parents what is going on, that's creating a mental health crisis inherently.
Exactly.
There's no way you teach mixed messages to a child. You expect the child to go home and carry on like Sally, and then they go to school and carry on like Sam. They're acting half the day. They're not living their own authentic life. So just
to add on to that, we tell children that I tell my kids before they go to camp, if anybody goes next to you, if anybody you feel uncomfortable about anything, you should never be in a room with an adult. This is exactly the exact opposite of what we educate our kids.
Right. This is so harmful, inherently harmful, inherently damaging. And by the way, you also have kids. Unfortunately, I heard recently of a child who went through the public school system and the poor girl was bullied straight through simply for having traditional values, for not signing on to the LGBTQ agenda, for even being bullied if they would receive a flyer, be afraid to not take the flyer, and then somebody would deliberately chase them around the corner to bully them for throwing out the flyer. I mean, this is the messaging that's being forced upon them, and that put her into a mental health crisis. Eating disorder, the whole gamut of things. Ruined her education. This is not, no parent would want that for their child. And honestly, no sane school system would want to see that going on in their schools. What's going on in the public schools today is fundamentally insane, and anybody with sanity knows that that is true.
I agree with you. And so we see in New York City, regardless of, I know we've identified that there are some people that you feel have been pushing this, but the DOE has bought into it. They have allowed for the pressure to put them in a position where they are now coming after the yeshivas. As I said, 26 of 28, they're now saying, are not giving an adequate education to be considered proficient in life or to the standards of the DOE. We've established the fact that the NYC DOE isn't doing a very good job themselves, with 3/4 of, as you said, 8th graders not proficient in math. So we have demonstrated they have rampant failure. So, get your own house in order. So what's the next step now, Sheva? What happens next?
I want to throw in one more thing, and then I'm happy.
Of course.
So I discussed my daughter who's 16, and the respect that I have for her all-girls high school for taking on the importance of mental health and really being there for the girls. And I want to mention something else that with the girls high school. So like a lot of the top jobs that they give out to the girls in 12th grade, which is the coming year, are given. They choose, there's about 200 girls in the grade. They choose about, say, 20, 25 girls, get the top jobs, which is like geo president, things like that. So many of these girls that are chosen for these top positions in the grade don't necessarily have the highest grades. So what do they have? They're kind, they're compassionate, they have high morals. Most of the time they have leadership personalities, but not always. And this is also a very clear message telling them the most healthy way. Maybe you're an 80 student, but you are capable, you're talented, you're compassionate, you're going to go places someday. So this I felt was incredibly touching, that they chose girls in the top positions who were just all around capable and talented, not just girls that received straight hundreds. That was something else.
Well, Sheva, you and I both know as moms, I could learn a lot in school. I was a good student. I performed well. But a lot of the interpersonal communication that you have with your husband or with your children, you're not learning that in a public school. What you're talking about is that in the schools that your daughter is going to and your children, that those types of things are valued and are taught, right? And so there's just a difference there. And the question becomes, Rabbi Menken, before we close, and I'm going to let Sheva speak a little bit about the next steps, but I also would like for you to talk about just in general, how public education may have a path forward respecting the values and the morals of families. Is there a path forward in your opinion? But Sheva, I'll let you finish speaking.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention about my son's school. So my son is now 15 and he goes to an all-boys school, private all-boys school, and that focuses mostly and only on Judaic studies at this point. And so what's a mandatory thing that all his classmates need to attend? A minimum of once a week, usually Thursday evening, it's mandatory. And oftentimes there's other times as well that they get together. They get together once a week with a mentor in somebody's home. They have snacks and treats and they have a get together and a conversation about self-improvement. They just sit around and discuss. They sing some Jewish songs together, Hasidic songs. They enjoy snacks together. But there's a certain openness and a vulnerability that they create, and they, for boys, such a young age, and show them you can be vulnerable, you can be open. We're not all perfect. We all have our challenges, and this goes for everyone in the entire school. This is not for a select group of boys that are struggling. They do this before the struggling boys emerge. This is for everybody.
Yeah. And
a mentor leads this. We call it a farbringen. A farbringen is the Yiddish term for means coming together. And this is a standard in every boys' school in my Chabad community that I'm part of. And it goes straight through manhood. My husband joins Farbringen every single Saturday after the Sabbath prayers. They sit around and have Farbringen together. And again, it's that same conversation of self-improvement. Now, it's based on what we learn in the Bible. So again, I never really thought of it this way, but I guess now that we're breaking it down, articulating it, is that so much of, like you just said so eloquently, so much of our values are taught in schools that really allow our students to emerge as successful human beings because of what we learn, all these things that are already embedded in our school system. So there's got to be a magic to how so many yeshiva students are so successful. It doesn't come by accident. It's hard work and perseverance and building of your self-esteem and all that stuff. It's not easy.
You're so right. But people have said to me before, like, "Oh, your kids are so well behaved. You're so lucky." And I'm like, "Oh, that's not luck. You don't understand."
How much went into that luck? Before we ever went anywhere.
Right. How many conversations about, what are the expectations of engagement in any given opportunity? What are your and always working with them and supporting them. So it's not luck. You say magic. It's not magic. It's intention and heart and passion for family and taking your role as a parent very, very seriously. I talk a lot about rights, Rabbi Menken, but with rights come responsibilities. And so in a situation in America right now, where we have so many parents that are having trouble managing some of the responsibilities of being parents. I'll say that in that way, right? And so some of the values, that you would normally expect to be transmitted in the home that may not be happening. And so there's a vacuum. So then the schools look and say, well, we're having issues with children regulating themselves, right? We're seeing mental distress in kids. I would say that I think the public schools are bringing on a lot of the mental distress and exacerbating it as well. But for American parents who aren't sending their children to a yeshiva, that may not have a private school or be able to afford a private school near them right now, as we navigate school choice, which I do believe in. I believe in education freedom. I believe that, I'm never going to be the one that stands at the burning schoolhouse and says to the parent, oh, no, you can't leave because I'm worried about what's going to happen, at the different school, right? What is there a path forward here when it comes to public education and how do we move forward?
I think the first thing to consider is what you mentioned about school choice and parental choice, because we are in this environment where one particular ideology is now being taught in the schools. The schools are really not supposed to just be teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. They are supposed to be teaching values and character. Martin Luther King said that, George Washington said that, Thomas Jefferson said that, leading educators say that, and yet the schools, first of all, they abdicated on it, but specifically they're celebrating a certain lifestyle that specifically says, no, anything goes, anything is legitimate, and you are a bigot and phobic if you don't support anything goes. In such an environment, I think one of the things you have to think about is school choice. I am not part of the Chabad community. I do not choose that. My kids do not go to Fabrengen. I do not go to Fabrengen on Saturday afternoon. But that's because I have a choice and the Taubys have a choice. And every parent gets to choose what they want. So first of all, even if you are not currently in a community where there is school choice, universal savings accounts and things like that are becoming more popular in states across the country. And that has to be something that every parent, even if you go to the public school system, you want to be behind. You want to be behind because, first of all, taxpayers are currently paying insane amounts of money. The school in New York, it's $30,000 a year for every single child. And in Chicago, it's worse.
Crazy.
And they claim, oh, but if you give school choice, the public schools will suffer because of the loss of money. But they see, no, we're not going to take any money away from the public schools. We're allocating additional money that private school parents can choose what they want to need to do. But besides that, wait a minute. If you don't need a classroom full of kids, that means a teacher you don't need to pay. Why is that a problem? Why is that a bad thing? That's where you recognize that the teachers union and the woke left are interested in the school and the institution. Whereas those who are advocates for parental choice and school choice are advocates for the child. What is the best thing for the child? So you have to drive that message forward that we are focused on what is best for the child. And you have to elect people to school boards who believe in the child and the primacy of the child. And in the meantime, certainly you have this situation where one particular ideology is being promoted in the schools to the exclusion of basic American values like character and respect for other people's property. You know, you have the same teacher who says woke lifestyle who will not tell the kids, thou shalt not steal, because it's some kind of a moral judgment. You know, that's not the way it works. The school is supposed to be representing a certain message about character, and we have to be demanding that also. These are positive messages. These are not something that's against anybody else. So don't listen to the folks who push back and say you're phobic and hateful and racist and misogynist and every other name they can come up with. You have to focus on the positive message. We care about the kids, and we care about the character and the American values that they are being taught, because this is a common platform that the founding fathers wanted. This is what America is about. So there's a lot that could be done. And do I think that the battle could be won? Absolutely. But there's going to have to be a lot of effort to push this agenda indoctrination out of the schools.
You're right. We'll spend over $850 billion on public education in America this year in 2023. And the proficiency scores out of the schools have never been lower. The teachers' unions have made American public schools a jobs program that care more about what adults want than what kids need. That is absolutely the case. I have seen it firsthand as a school board member and now working with schools and parents across the entire country. And it's something that the American people need to regain control and power of. That's why Moms for Liberty works so hard to reclaim the school board seats and then reform public education. And I am hopeful that we're working towards and are going to be able to make that happen. Sheva, I have always said, and we continue to say at Moms for Liberty, I don't have to agree with everything that you choose to do as a parent to support your right as a parent to teach your child as you see fit, right? And I think you feel the same way about, parents having that right to raise their children. A message to moms as they are standing up, and all moms, as Rabbi Menken has said, there are Christian moms, Jewish moms, Muslim moms, moms who maybe don't have a religion or a faith, but that are really scared about the fact that they're sending their child into an environment that the teaching is antithetical to the teaching in their home, and it's challenging their authority in their child's life. So some parting advice for parents and moms
Can
in
I
particular?
jump in just to point out that there's no gender difference on this? There's a lot of dads.
Yes, there's no gender
Just-
difference. There is no gender difference. There's no gender difference, but we are Moms for Liberty, and there is something, and even in the Jewish faith, I know the role of the woman and the mother is incredibly important. And I feel like once you have a child, once you are pregnant and you give birth to a child as a woman, it changes you. Every aspect of yourself. In fact, the DNA of your child is imprinted on you as a mom. I have a visceral reaction when they scrape their knee, my stomach turns. I'm not the only mom, right? I know that feels that. So you're right, it's for moms and dads, but I do this podcast, and when I think about who my audience is, it's the moms who are working
Oh
with
yeah,
us
no,
every
I
day.
don't mean to. I think Moms for Liberty is doing incredibly important work. Actually, okay, now that I've
Thank you.
taken over the mic, I apologize, but I do want to point out that it is amazing, and I think Dennis Prager put it very well at your conference. He just said, they lie. The left just wants to lie. You think about what Moms for Liberty is all about. It's about individual parental choice. They don't want the ability to indoctrinate anybody else's child. The left does. And they project that on Moms for Liberty. They claim Moms for Liberty is pro-indoctrination of other people's kids. They say it all the time, and it's ridiculous, and it's completely wrong. They are violently opposed, but obviously not physically violently opposed, to indoctrination. And by the way, this is where that whole Hitler quote, deliberate misuse and manipulation of somebody saying, look, Hitler is the one who pointed out that indoctrination works. And indoctrination is how you take over a society. That's exactly why it's the last thing you want. That is the message of Moms for Liberty. That is a message of sanity. And people cannot help but lie about it, and they cannot help but lie about you. Now I want to let Sheva answer.
They are lying, but they are, and what I will say back is they are lying, but we will keep standing for truth, and the truth will prevail. If they have to lie to try to win, they will lose. That is just the truth. Yeah. So I know that in my heart, but thank you for that, Rabbi Menken. I appreciate it.
Definitely, the truth will prevail. I'm saying if I was a parent in that situation where I needed to send my kids to a public school, I would just try really hard to teach my kids and educate them the way I'm doing already, and let them, differentiate. I mean, the world is like that when they walk out in the streets. And even I have to do that to my kids and explain to them different things they're seeing and explain to them what it means and why it's happening. This also comes from just having a trusting relationship with your children, for them to trust you, and they know that you're the first person they go to. And, you have to be their main source of all that. It's a harder job, much harder. I can't imagine having to put my kids to bed every day, put them into an environment of people that believe things so antithetical to my home. Very hard. And my heart goes out to those families.
But I will say that there's a huge difference between when the teacher maintains a neutral posture versus when they actually promote an ideology that's antithetical to what's going on in the home. Because there is no conflict in the child's mind. When they go to school, they have a class in which they learn arithmetic, and a class in which they learn history, and a class in which they learn writing and grammar, and then they come home and have a class in morals and ethics. At least there's consistency there. And the same way that I don't look at this teacher and claim they're at odds with that teacher because they teach different subjects, it doesn't set up a conflict. Whereas if I'm in a home which teaches me values and ethics based on the Bible, and then go to a classroom where I'm told I have to celebrate things that are antithetical to the Bible, then the conflict has been set up in the mind of me, the impressionable child. And that's creating that conflict. That's creating that crisis. That's creating that problem. That's what's putting the daylight between teachers and students. That is what you guys are fighting to end, and that is what needs to end.
And we won't stop. I promise you that. Moms are going to stand for their and dads for their rightful place in their children's lives. And I just thank you both very much for coming on and discussing this issue. Moms across the country, support New York moms to have the freedom to educate their children as they know and feel best. You guys are on the front lines. Sheva, I'm going to be thinking about you and your family. And I hope that we'll find other ways to be able to work together in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Rabbi Menken.